One of the challenges of being an effective leader is developing the skill of listening. If you consistently listen to others, valuing them and what they have to offer, they are likely to develop strong trust and loyalty. How can we become better listening leaders who communicate respect and increase our influence? Well, you'll find out how today, right here on the Five Gifts podcast. You're listening to the Five Gifts podcast, a weekly show designed to equip leaders in the Spirit-filled church. I'm Bruce Ritter, and along with my co-host Charles Russell, we offer insights for leading the local church in the fullest expression of Jesus. If you're interested in learning more about practical theology, the gifts of the Spirit, and spiritual disciplines, this is the show for you. Welcome to the Five Gifts podcast.
Welcome to the Five Gifts podcast. Glad to have you here with us today. We're talking about listening and how to lead through listening. This is going to be an important episode for me. This is a skill I need to work on. So we're going to learn how to listen better and be better listeners. Bruce, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Charles. I hope you are. I know that life has been turned upside down for people in Western North Carolina, and that would include you. But we trust that there's some progress being made, even though it's only been a little over a week now, and hopefully things are going to be getting back together, get back better soon.
Yeah, well, little by little and step by step. Like we said last week, God is good through all of this, and we're going to continue to trust in Him, continue to follow Him, and we're going to be better. You said it right about that.
Yeah. Well, today we're talking about becoming a better listening leader, and that's one of the often missed skills of being a good leader. A lot of times, as a leader, the onus is on communication, and we're accustomed to telling and speaking and using our verbal skills, but there is a vital skill when it comes to being a good listener. So, Charles, why is becoming a good listener essential to becoming a better leader?
Well, listening helps us to lead better. Listening helps increase our influence. Most people, when we listen to respond and not to hear. So here's a great maybe a paradigm shift as we begin to think and understand more about listening in leadership. We want to be impressed and interested, not be impressive and interesting. So listen, when as we lead through listening, the attention, the focus is not on us as the leader. It is on the person and the people whom we are leading. So again, we want to be impressed and be interested rather than being impressive and being interesting. So again, our leadership is focused and our listening is focused toward those we are leading. So let's talk about just a few things that really shape and flesh out the value of listening. Number one, listening shows respect. Again, I don't want to retell a story, but I've mentioned it, I think, a couple of times on the podcast about having a conversation with someone and them answering phone calls or answering texts and in the midst of our conversation. And to me, that's just a sign of disrespect. And so we want to lead through listening, and one of the values of listening is it shows respect. Secondly, listening builds relationships. Any relationship to be successful and to thrive is a two-way street. And so if I'm not listening, I don't have anything that I can contribute. I'm certainly not showing value to the relationship. If I'm not listening, there is no relationship. So listening builds relationships. Third would be that listening increases knowledge. Again, the more I listen, the more in tune I am to conversation and to relationships, the more I can hear and the more I can understand in my hearing. It increases knowledge about the other person or about the other people or about the organization as a whole. Listening increases our knowledge. Listening also generates ideas. I just think it's amazing that in the course of a conversation, through one statement or through one sentence, maybe that the other person that they make, through one statement they make, how multiple ideas can be generated from just a few words that are uttered from the other person in the course of conversation. So listening can generate ideas. Listen, leader, the issue that you've been struggling with, the block that you've been trying to overcome, it may be found in a conversation that you have with someone else that you're leading. So the idea that you've been searching for, the solution that you've been looking for, may be in a conversation with someone else, and you have to, and I have to listen, um, because that helps to generate those ideas. Listen, as the leader, we're not all the ideas are not found in us. All the solutions are not contained within us. Your family, your team, your church you're leading, wherever you're leading at, there all the solutions are there. Uh, and listening allows us to mine those gems out, allow those ideas to be generated as we're listening to others in the conversation. Listening, here's another one, listening builds loyalty. Isn't that something? That if we would actually take time to listen to others, they would sense and feel a sense of attachment to us, and a sense of loyalty to us as the leader. Again, we're not listening to manipulate, we're listening to serve them, we're listening to be able to lead, uh, again, the individual, the team, the organization. But in the process of listening, there is an attachment that takes place. People build and they develop a sense of loyalty, in that process. Um, Finally, certainly not least, but last in this list of discussion, listening is a great way to help others and to help yourself. And so, as we are leading, through listening, listening allows us to not only help others, but it helps us as the leaders is ourselves, and in turn, we're working together. There's a sense listening. I think another way to say this is listening provides a sense of camaraderie. We talked about loyalty, but also just the sense of togetherness. Listening helps to accomplish that, and when we're together, man, we are certainly better. That is for sure. So, Bruce, I know we want to become better listeners. Any ideas, any ways you can help us to improve our listening skills?
Yeah, I think we need to recognize that all listening is not created equal. Everybody has, well, unless there's some damage to your capacity to actually hear,
Hmm.
listening is something not everyone does. Everyone hears, but not everyone listens.
Yeah.
Hearing is passive. Hearing is something that the body is always capable of doing, and again, unless there's been some diminished ability. But in a sense, we hear things all the time. We hear the droning of noises around us, ambient noises. We can hear people talking. How many times have you sat in a coffee shop and you know there are people around you, but you don't know the content or context of conversation? That's what listening brings. But even in listening, there are different levels of listening, and I think just for category's sake, I think there are at least three levels of listening. One is the kind of listening we're talking about. You can be listening to someone in an informal way. I think that's the most common form. Again, it's passive, but it's the way we listen in our everyday conversations. It involves listening for facts and information. The most basic kind of listening tends to be passive. You'll find that even in casual conversation, listeners focus on the words, but they may notice what's being communicated in the speaker's posture, their gestures, their tone of voice. their pace of speech. In general, that's the kind of listening that involves paying attention to what another person is trying to communicate. It's listening for what you need to know from that person. Active listening is a little deeper. Active listening is different because the listener really concentrates on what's being said. They're paying close attention. They show awareness of the speaker. And sometimes they ask clarifying questions, like maybe in response to something that's being said, maybe the way they feel, or maybe a situation they're trying to describe. An active listener might say, "Hey, could you describe that further for me?" So questioning becomes the means to listen deeper. You might ask, if someone shares an experience with you, how did that impact you? Or what did you learn from that? Again, the speaker knows that their message is being heard and it's being processed. So again, active listening is listening a little more attentively, not passively. We're talking about the listening that involves paying attention to what's not only what's being said, but learning from what's being communicated through things like posture, energy level, tone of voice. Sometimes attitudes are expressed. You pick up on that. And again, that's not always indicated by words. You pick up on people's emotion. Active listening is definitely more engaged with the person speaking. We're not just absorbing the facts. We're not just listening for facts and information and waiting for our spot to start talking again. But we're listening deeper to what the person is expressing. And this is a kind of listening. One thing that you'll find is that this kind of listening helps the other person relax, and they begin to share more honestly and deeper because they understand that you, as the listener, are really engaged in what they're saying. But I think there's an even deeper level of listening, and I think it bears us to cover this morning. Intuitive listening. Some people would call it more of a third level listening. That's where what you're beginning to do is you're beginning to listen to a person outside of your own reflection. You're not thinking about how their experience would affect you if you were in their shoes. You begin to think about their experience. There's a high level of empathy, which we talked about a few weeks ago, but intuitive listening is listening with a high level of concentration and awareness. We listen for things that the other person may not even notice, like inconsistencies, attitudes, emotions. We begin to discover ways they think about certain ideas, the way they think about people. We begin to hear values, beliefs, dreams. We begin to pick up on illustrations and metaphors that they use, and how that may give a deeper context for how they're processing certain situations in life. One thing that you'll pick up as an intuitive listener, you begin to pick up on some of their self-sabotaging behavior. This really is the kind of listening that asks, "What am I really hearing behind the words?" It's a listening that's alert to changes in energy, enthusiasm, voice pitch, body language, and sometimes that can either unite or show contradictions between that person's verbal and nonverbal expressions. This is the kind of listening that a lot of coaches employ, because it's essential to help a person process life and get from one level to the next. Again, this is the kind of listening that seems to be aware of the other person's agenda. And it involves, again, intuitively picking up on what they really have in mind. So I hope that's helpful. I can think of some common barriers to listening, just active listening. Few people, I think, really reach their potential when it comes to listening. A lot of people think of themselves as good listeners, but how much of your listening is aimed at getting beyond facts and information? And so some of the common barriers to listening really well is where you overvalue talking. I can think of conversations that I've been in, and I try to pride myself on being a good listener. I try to listen with a sense of priority and emphasis. But there's sometimes I just have things I want to say, and And you'll find that desire um, to be the driver of the communication, where you overvalue your talking role, that's an obvious barrier to good listening, because you're not listening to what's being said. You're just listening for the next break to insert your point. Another common barrier is lacking focus, just lacking focus on listening deeper. Um, we're satisfied at hearing the facts. We're satisfied at hearing, just the details, rather than again listening on a level that requires a much deeper focus. I think experiencing mental fatigue. Sometimes you're in just a mental headspace. That's a normal thing. You shouldn't beat yourself up over it if you struggle to listen. Just because you're mentally fatigued, you're worn out. I'm an introverted person, and I can find myself, once I've listened to people so much that I can begin to mentally check out, and that's a good indication for me that I'm just not in a good place to listen well. I think another thing that we do a lot of times is we stereotype people, or what I like to call, we typecast them.
Mhm.
In other words, we're of an opinion of someone, and we've already kind of projected where this is going to go, and so that's very, very limiting when it comes to helping a person think about improvement, or maybe uh, writing a different future for them. So when we stereotype, we tend to script out, either what they're going to say next, or what's behind what they're saying, rather than listening to what's behind what they're saying. Another barrier: carrying personal emotional baggage, especially if you do a lot of projecting. When you listen to people, you're projecting sometimes your motivation into them. And if you're hurting, if you've got some sensitive wounds in your life that haven't been dealt with, and a lot of times you're going to project that onto others. It's going to be hard for you to listen uh, through a grid that's uncluttered and not filled up with some personal stuff that you might need to deal with. I think another one, and this is pretty common, being preoccupied with yourself. Um, how many of us have had teenagers? A teenager, their world, man, they get to that stage of being a teenager where the world does revolve around them, and so you think, well, they're not listening to me. Well, of course they're not listening to you. They're just preoccupied with their world and the everything that's orbiting around them. So we can be that. We can still be, as adults, we can be so preoccupied with ourselves, and sometimes it's not bad. It's just impressing some things, situations and circumstances that are pressing around us, and it's hard to focus on others. But that is certainly a barrier. Um, One thing to ask yourself is, what are some of the barriers to listening, to being a better listener, and how can you overcome them? So we can develop some listening skills. And Charles, do you want to help me with these?
Sure. I wasn't really listening there, so you caught me off guard. Uh, no,
Charles,
before we
what
do that,
what what help?
go ahead.
No, I wasn't listening to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, touche. Thanks a lot. I did have a question. You were talking
Yeah.
about some of the different levels of listening, and in that,
Mhm.
I think in the second level, you talked about being able to ask questions, listening, and listening not with to give answers,
Mhm.
but to be able to ask questions. And so when I go to lead others, and I'm leading through listening, um, should I? And I'm genuinely asking here: should I enter into the conversation with a list of predetermined questions that I bring into the conversation? Does that help me to listen better, or should I just allow the conversation to generate the questions? Does that make
Uh,
sense?
you know, yeah, no, absolutely. I know, uh, even as a coach, where I mean, I do a lot of listening.
Yeah.
There have been times I've had like some questions, especially the kind of questions that help me transition in conversation or clarifying questions.
Hmm.
Those aren't necessarily questions meant to drive the conversation as much as they are to help positively steer it in a way that benefits the other person. So, um, you can ask leading questions,
Hmm.
and so I'd be real careful about those. But I think as a listener, if you want to think of a few things in your back pocket that just help you to remember to keep the focus on them. Again, clarifying questions like, how did that impact you? Or tell me more about that. Sometimes I love just it's the contraction question, which is you have to use the right voice inflection, but you simply say, and, or,
Yeah.
uh, or and what else? So anything like that, because I think that communicates some value to the person that's speaking, because it gives them permission to keep talking. It
Hmm.
lets them know that you're engaged, and so yeah, I think those kind of questions are okay. And you may need, if you're starting out to be a good listener and maybe even trying to apply some coaching skills, be thinking of those open-ended questions that help further their growth. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think that can be very helpful.
Okay. Good. Good. Well, that's helpful for sure. And man, I'm just gonna put a plug in here for Bruce. He is a phenomenal listener. He is a coach and excellent, excellent coach, tremendous coach. And he is definitely skilled at listening. So skilled, in fact, I, when he coaches me, he hears me say things that I wasn't even aware I was saying. He just has great insight in listening, and has sharpened his listening skills. So, uh, man, I'm telling you, Bruce. Not that we're trying to assign labels or tags, but Bruce has some expert listening skills, and as I know, just personally, has been a great help to me, just through listening, and has helped to lift my leadership in that regard. Um, then one other thought that I had in this was just you were talking about um, being preoccupied with ourselves in listening. I think that's something that I really try to guard against. As I'm trying to listen to others and lead through listening, to really guard against being preoccupied. Because let's just be honest, I have an incredibly interesting life, and so why wouldn't I be preoccupied? But I
Yeah.
think that's one of my pet peeves is someone listening to me, or you hear them trying to listen to others, but they just have an uncanny knack for making every conversation about themselves. um, they can just I don't care what the topic is. I don't care what the crisis is. At some point in the conversation, they can shift it onto them, and now where I'm bearing my soul, they have taken it and made it about some tragedy or perceived crisis in their life. So
Yeah.
uh, so
Their
so
favorite segue is anything that leads back to them.
yeah, yeah. Let's talk about me.
Yeah.
So anyway,
You'll find, Charles. I don't want to diminish. I don't want to diminish anything that we have to share that can help people. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
mentoring has been a historically a phenomenal way of helping people grow. That being said, as a mentor, uh, usually the responsibility for content is on you to come up with solutions. What we're saying in listening is that sometimes you're developing a relationship that builds trust and collaboration, and sometimes you're going to help people find the answers that they already have, and
Hmm.
so that's one of the real values of listening.
Yeah. Well, indeed. Well, Bruce, I apologize. I have hijacked our conversation. I'm going to try and get us back on the road here. How can we develop our listening skills?
Yeah. Well, let's do these together, Charles.
Oh,
I think the first one I would say is look at the speaker. I mean, put your attention on them. Make sure they know that you're there. Again, not ready to bring it back around to your agenda. Um, but keep your focus on them. Look at them. Make eye contact with them. And I want to warn you about eye contact. Sometimes that can actually, depending on a person's personality and kind of the orientation of how they deal with relationship, making direct eye contact can be off-putting. I'm not talking about just simple eye contact. What I'm saying is create the environment where they know that they are your attention. They have your attention. And so I think that's very important. Charles, what would you say is important?
well, I think, or I know this to be important. Do not interrupt. Don't interrupt people. Um, listen, listen intently and listen actively. So let the person talk, and I would even interject here, um, in our listening to be careful so that we don't interrupt. Let them finish their statements, but then, as Bruce has talked about, maybe ask a clarifying question before we attempt to give any kind of definitive response to what the person is saying. We want to allow people to freely and to openly share,
Mm,
and be able to talk. So by no means do we want to interrupt them. Allow them to completely share their thoughts and ideas.
okay.
You got another good one for us, Bruce?
Yeah, well, I think a focus on understanding, making sure that you're listening to how words are used, how they're said.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to energy level. Listen to tone of voice or the pitch of their voice. Listen to those spikes. Listen to silence. Sometimes they're going to get to a spot, especially if they're introverted. They're going to get to a spot where they just need to shut down, their own talking because they're processing what they're saying. And if you ever find those moments, you want to, like, I had a coaching conversation a couple of months ago, and the person got real quiet, and they just said, "Forgive me, I'm just, my mind, the gears of my mind right now are working." And so I honor that silence, and so I honored that guy's silence. And after about uh, 25, 30 seconds, I said, "So tell me what's going on in your mind."
Mm-hmm.
And but it gave them time to. That was a pregnant moment,
Yeah.
and it gave them time. And you'll find that with extroverts, that that they're generating creativity as they talk. They're generating energy and creativity and ideas. And you'll find that, like, mid sentence, they'll have that aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just how they're wired. And so they're outwardly processing, and it's in that outward processing that they're coming up with creativity. So,
Yeah.
so really try to focus on understanding and not just focusing on the words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, that's it's very insightful, and that's very powerful too, helping us in our listening. I think another way we can develop our listening skills is to determine the need at the moment. And so in the listening, uh, our part of listening in the conversation is to determine the need at the moment. And so what I think about that is, we have to listen to be able to determine the need. And so as we're listening, it may be that, some people um, come to the conversation and don't have a lot to say, or maybe don't want to say very much. Maybe intentionally, willfully, they're not saying very much. And so in my active listening, I'm able to then probe with some questions to draw out some communication from that individual. On the other hand, there's some folks that that come to the moment, they come to the conversation, and it is, they open their mouth, and I mean it just all comes out, and so in my listening as a leader, I've got to begin to determine what's the need in the moment, and so I can begin to ask some clarifying questions there, or maybe even some direct interjections to say, hey, listen, let's focus on this point, on this need, so that's what listening does. And that's a great way to sharpen those listening skills, is to be ready to, in the moment, to be flexible, to flex in the moment,
Mm.
to flex in the conversation. So that's going to greatly improve our listening skills. Determine the need at the moment.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's important, if I could just add a couple more, is check your emotions and suspend your judgment.
Yeah.
Those are going to be barriers to really listening at a level that you'll be able to do what Charles just said, and that's determining the need at the moment. Sometimes your emotions, your judgment, that's going to cloud what's really being said. And I love what our um, he's deceased now, but just one of the greatest leaders I think our district ever had was Charles Cookman, and he used to say, "What's happening is not what's really going on." And I've always adapted that to what's being said is not what's really going on. And so learning to listen past words is really important. So always check your emotions and suspend your judgment. Charles, what do you think it's important? What do you think is important as far as how should what should we try to be conscious of when listening to people?
Sure. Well, last episode we kind of formed up a checklist. So let's do that again today. Kind of a checklist of what to listen for. Let's just use the an acronym. The word HEAR, HEAR. The letter H. Um, these are the things that we're listening for as we're leading through listening. Uh, the word HEAR, the letter H, hopes and dreams about how they want to improve and make things better. So we're actively listening for their hopes and dreams. The letter E, what we'll begin to listen and discover their energies and passion. Um, those things that seem to inspire the person, but also the energy drainers that pull the person down. As we listen, that's what the E stands for. Again, the word HEAR, HE, and now the letter A, which would be, we're listening for their attitudes and their abilities, those things that impact how one sees potential for the future, but that might be squelched or frustrated in the present. So we're listening for those attitudes and abilities. And the last letter, the letter R, would be, we're listening for their routines, their habits, their ways of doing things that might need to be changed. So again, just a simple acronym, the word HEAR, HEAR. Just gives us a kind of a plug and play tool to take with us in our leadership conversations. So we don't want to just give you a bunch of information. We want you, and we want us as well, to be able to measure our listening skills. And so our encouragement is this: find someone that you know and that you trust, that would be willing to ask you these following questions to evaluate your listening skills based on 9 qualities of good listening. Now, look, you got to have thick skin here. Don't interrupt. Don't defend yourself as you receive their feedback and their explanation. You're doing this as a leadership exercise. You're trying to get better in your listening skills. So listen and receive their input. But find someone you know well and that you trust. Let them ask you these questions and then give some feedback. Here are the questions. Number 1. Do I usually look at the speaker while he or she is talking? Number 2, do I wait for the speaker to finish talking before I respond? Number 3, do I make understanding my goal? Number 4, am I usually sensitive to the speaker's immediate need? 5th question, do I make it a practice to check my emotions? Number 6, do I regularly suspend my judgment until I get the whole story? 7, am I in the practice of summing up what the speaker says at major intervals? Number 8, do I ask questions for clarity when needed? Final question, do I communicate to others that listening is a priority? Bruce, any thoughts on that, about that process, what that might could look like, or final thoughts on our episode today?
Well, I think that's a fantastic way of evaluating your listening. The best gauge that you're a good listener is to ask someone else. Ask someone else about their sense of how you listen to them. Now, I got to tell you, my wife has told me plenty of times I don't listen. My wife has told me plenty of times that I'm checking out, and frustrates her to no end. And so be honest with yourself. Make sure that you're ready for some honest feedback. And again, I think what we've said in Motion is that to be a good listener, you have to be in the right headspace. You're not always in a position to be a great listener. Mm-hmm. And so try to carve out those times in your schedule, whether it's over coffee with someone, or maybe it's in some leadership development relationship you've established with someone. Try to carve out time to really listen to their agenda, listen to what they're saying. And I know as a leader, we're responsible for a large organization with ambitious goals, and it's important that you stay on point as a leader. But we are talking about a resource that's available to you just within your own skill set. If you'll develop it, mm-hmm. will help you build trust and deepen your relationship with the people that you need to help you on your team.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for listening as we've talked and discussed about leading through the skill of listening. We'd love to listen to you and hear your story. You can reach out to Bruce at coachingcardia.com. Bruce is like I've said, he is a skilled listener and can provide great leadership insights through listening, and can be a great asset to your leadership. So reach out to him again, coachingcardia.com. You can reach me at charlesrussellministries.com or charlesrusselltraining.com. And I'm not going to listen. I'm just going to tell you what to do. So, no, I'm kidding. I'd be honored to listen to you as well. And we'll grow in our leadership together and navigate this leadership journey. So, again, we're thrilled that you've been a part today of the 5 Gifts podcast. We hope you have a blessed and great week. And we'll see you next time on the 5 Gifts podcast.
You've been listening to the 5 Gifts podcast. If you would like to take the next step as a spiritual leader, we invite you to visit either of our websites or contact us for leadership coaching. We can help you reach the next level in your own growth and leadership. We provide leadership, spiritual gift, and personality assessments that give you a better grasp of your leadership style. And we also create a customized growth plan that empowers you to reach your full kingdom potential. We can't wait to hear from you.